Hello, hello, hello. Welcome on in, beautiful people. Welcome to the first ever stream here at the Narwhal Pod. I'm over here down in this little bottom corner. For those that are looking around, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And today we are doing a deep dive. This is going to be a reoccurring segment. It's going to be one of many reoccurring segments here over at the Narwhal Pod over on Twitch or at Narwhal Pod on YouTube. For those watching there, appreciate you guys as well. So what we're going to be doing for our deep dives is we're going to be deep diving into research and information and learning as much as we can about a specific marine animal or something about a habitat, research that's going on, something cool and interesting regarding the ocean to hopefully kind of inspire you guys a little bit to see that like the ocean's worth saving and that there's some really cool stuff. So I hope at the end of this that you learn something new that you get to take with you, a fun fact that you get to tell in an awkward situation, something like that. And what's the most appropriate animal for the Narwhal Pod to do our first deep dive on? Obviously narwhals. So we're going to be going through narwhals. We're going to be talking all about them. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to do an Our Planet clip. We do have videos today, which is exciting. So we're going to be showing off some videos made from Our Planet, Netflix original series, and Nat Geo's World's Weirdest. So we're going to be watching both of those clips on top of going over introduction, some really cool history. I learned a lot about narwhals. I thought I knew a lot as like the dude, you know, but learned a lot of interesting stuff. We're going to be going into some of the science stuff, so talking about like family, relatives, extinction, like all that kind of stuff. Since we are trying to, right, as is said at the beginning, our goal is to save the or protect our oceans through the power of gaming. We're going to talk about narwhals and gaming, so some places where you can see them. Then we're going to finish with some conservation, and then for those of you hanging out over on Twitch, we're going to rate you a beautiful human being. I don't know who yet, but we'll find out and figure it out. So without further ado, let's start off with this Our Planet clip.
Narwhal, the origin of the unicorn legend. Their 3-meter tusk is in fact no more than an overgrown canine tooth. But its exact function, like so much about narwhals, is still in part a mystery. Each summer, narwhals travel to the same part of the Arctic and patiently wait at the ice edge for a crack to open up. A lead in the ice, wide enough for them to swim along. Eventually, a crack appears. Their passage to sheltered, shallow bays. Narwhals are extremely timid and rarely filmed underwater. These ice whales eagerly travel down the leads as soon as they open, because they're safer from predators protected by the ice. The lead tides may also give them access to new feeding grounds.
Pretty neat, in my opinion. I don't know, I like watch that and I'm like awestruck by these creatures. I think that they are super neat. And so let's talk about them. Where am I? There I am. Hello again. So what is a narwhal? Where are they located? What do they eat? This is going to be a basic introduction. For those that don't know, one of the biggest myths I think exists with narwhals is that they're not real. And I think one of our big goals through this has always been to be like, no, these are real creatures. They are real unicorns of the sea. They fully exist, which is super cool. So they're known as the unicorn of the sea. It's a species of toothed whale native to the Arctic. Their Latin name is Monodon monoceros. They inhabit the Arctic waters of Canada, Greenland, and Russia. So we can see the map under the unicorn of the sea over there. So that's like generally where they're at. The blue is where they're at into the world, where we're able to see under the Arctic and some of those things. Adults measure 3 to 5.5 meters, which for those that are in the US, that's about 10 to 18 feet. So you can see we have a little comparison of like a regular scuba diver there. So they're pretty long, right? A 20-foot dude. And then they weigh, this I like find it wild. I know like they're like blubbery and everything else, but yeah, they weigh up to 3,500 pounds. So a ton of, almost 2 tons, which is crazy. So males of the species have a large, this is what we all know, right? That long tusk, which is that, as said in our planet, a protruding left canine. Here's like the thing. So I put this in here. We've done a lot of research and we're consistently doing research on this and like trying to learn more and figure it out. And there's been a lot of, let's just say, theories of what this like tooth is used for. So it's thought to be used as a weapon, so like to protect themselves from certain like predators or other narwhals, a tool for feeding. So there's been like things about talking about like they whack fish. So because of their like, right, imagine eating and you have a giant tooth sticking out of your mouth. It's going to be difficult, right? So narwhals particularly eat by getting close to the fish and then just like suctioning all the water in and eating the fish just by like slurping them up out of the water. And so it's harder if the fish is like swimming away, so it's believed that like they'll use their tooth to like knock it so it stops moving, and then it's like it doesn't try and swim out of its like suction. They believe that maybe like moose and deer with antlers, that maybe the tooth is used to attract mates, so like maybe a bigger, fancier, cooler, well looking tooth. Sometimes, fun fact, I don't actually have this in there, but fun fact, certain narwhals will actually have 2 teeth, and so you'll have 2. I think there was like one case of 3, so you have like a double horned one, which is pretty cool. And then also there's most recently they've talked that the narwhals will use it as basically like if you have sensitive teeth, you can kind of like tell when like things are hot or cold or salty or anything. So like they might be using it to like help determine salinity of water, to help figure out where currents are and pathways and where like the ice caps might be melting and things like that. So we really don't know what we're using it for. These are all just some theories, but it's pretty cool. Their diet mainly consists of polar and Arctic cod, Greenland halibut, cuttlefish, shrimp, and armhook squid. So they are carnivores primarily. And then they've been hunted for thousands of years by Inuit in northern Canada and Greenland for meat and ivory, and regulated subsistence hunting continues to this day as a part of like preserving that history and everything. We'll go over conservation, kind of what that looks like and how they're protected at the end. Sorry, I got the hiccups. I like consumed a bunch of food. So let's talk about some history. So there's like two major history things to hit on. One is that like the first recorded history that we have of the narwhal was in the 1500s from European settlers, mostly because that's like kind of how recorded history works for us, unfortunately, is that a lot of it comes from that era, those people. And so with that, the Europeans first really had contact with the Vikings, and that was like their first real portion of it. So we know that there is written, known, documented history with narwhals back in the 1500s. However, there have been natives interacting with these for even longer. So really the first case that we think happened was probably like 11 million years ago. But like when they started evolving and everything else away from porpoise. So even, and then like really like near prehistoric times is kind of what we're talking about, right? But they've also been a story and passed down in a story by Inuit people for thousands of years. And so we're kind of going to, or at least hundreds of years. So we kind of consider the Inuit people to be the first people to have interaction with the narwhals. And so they have this story about the legend. And so right here, what we have is the legend of the woman who turned into a narwhal. This is in the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. And so this is a rough, there's like a few different things and translations, and like of course it's oral history, and with oral history things change, but this is generally how that story goes. And interesting thing, there are two versions of it where along with it, where it starts with once upon a time, which is kind of like an interesting fascination that's such like what we consider like a European folklore and a Brothers Grimm thing, that the Inuit people were also saying basically the equivalent of once upon a time. And so, once upon a time, there was a blind boy who lived with his mother. Now, some iterations will say that it's his stepmother. Certain iterations have a little bit of pre-story with this. But like I said, this is kind of going to be a brief in like one of the kind of like translations that exist to this story. So I'm just like adding that because it kind of makes sense later. They were poor and often hungry. One day, a group of hunters returned from the sea with many seals, but they shared little with the mother and her son. Later, the boy's mother went out to the shore and the boy followed, guided by her voice. As they approached the water, the boy heard the sound of whales surfacing. His mother told him that if he could catch one of the whales, they would never go hungry again. Now, this is something that's not covered in this, but there is basically that the boy is blind, and it's kind of like led to believe that the mother did something to blind him. So the boy did not know how, but a loon took pity on him. The loon dove beneath the water with the boy and taught him how to see, restoring his sight. When he returned to the surface, he could see for the first time in his life. With his new sight, he saw his cruel mother and decided to take revenge for her years of neglect and cruelty. He tied her to a line attached to a harpoon and threw it into a passing whale. The whale dove deep into the ocean, pulling the woman down with it. As she was dragged under, her hair twisted and stretched out behind her, transforming into a long spiral tusk, and she became the first narwhal. So that's where the Inuit legend of like what they think the first, and like the thing is, so we'll go into actually I don't really talk about this much, but the interesting thing with whales and cetaceans and dolphinian is that they are believed to have been originally land walkers, and so they went from land to the ocean, which kind of makes sense. We're talking about how the world's changed from ice ages into melting points into all that, and the world at one point, right, it's always been majority ocean. And so it's like believed for various reasons, some say food, some say due to like avoiding predators and other things, that whales and narwhals and vaquita and dolphins and all these cetaceans, they evolved into the ocean. We can tell, and like we can see like with belugas and porpoises, that it's really kind of creepy where you can like see from underneath how they very clearly look like they have like leg muscles. And we can also see in the flippers, and this is like from where this stems, is that we can see in the flippers what look like digits or fingers. And so we kind of look at that and we're like, okay, these most likely look like they had legs because they have similar hip and leg structure that's not being used for their tail in a normal way, like a fish or something. They look more like us or other land walkers, like bipeds. And then they have these fins that have hands in them, basically. And so that leads us to believe that they once walked the earth. So it kind of makes sense when we're talking about how a narwhal could have once been a woman in an idea, because if you're looking and swimming or kind of like looking at these things, especially through evolution, you start to like kind of see, and you might catch glimpses where they really do look like humans or landwalkers. So then, right, we both talked about this. Vikings was the other big one. So Vikings and other Norse traders in the Middle Ages often obtained narwhal tusks through trade with Inuit or other Arctic people. They believe the tusks came from unicorns. So this is kind of like, and we kind of go into this, that we don't really believe that the Vikings were, there's really no evidence proving that Vikings were hunting narwhals or even had seen narwhals. And if they did near Greenland in that area, they were probably, orcas is a natural predator to narwhals, so there was a chance that there was like carcasses and other things that were washing up or could be found, and they were getting like these horns from that. But it's also believed like the Inuit were selling these and the Vikings were bringing it over, and they didn't know where it was coming from, and it was like, hey, we have this horn, and they're calling them unicorn horns. And so, and like there's some talk about like Vikings being smart traders, once like create this story of this mystical creature that existed, and that it was so majestic and all these things, and it had this magical and healing power and could detect poison and all these things. And really, like, it sounds like a really good door-to-door salesman. So that's kind of like the belief of what happened. And so there was, even though like we don't think they're hunted at this point, there was still a huge trade and business, and it became so profitable it actually helped finance parts of Norse exploration trade networks across the entire North Atlantic. And so it was like this huge trade route, and this huge like ended up moving on, and they like spread this mystique of this Arctic whale through medieval Europe. And actually it's believed that narwhal comes from Norse words. So narwhal like translates roughly to like pale body, and it's because like they're pale skinned. And there was like belief that the Vikings used to call narwhals like ghosts or like floaters or things like that. And so that like term narwhal, and the term that we use, comes from like Viking times to mean like pale whale basically, or pale body. So now we're gonna watch World's Weirdest, a Nat Geo. Oop.
Male narwhals can weigh nearly 2 tons. With bodies up to 16 feet long. But it's their tusks that make them weird among whales. The tusk is actually a single gigantic tooth that can reach 10 feet in length. But why swing such a big sword? Scientists aren't exactly sure. Narwhals are an animal of misinformation and mystery, dating back to the Middle Ages, when their tusks were fobbed off to royalty as unicorn horns. Is it used to impale their prey? No. Narwhals can dive more than a half mile down to the ocean floor to feast on cod, squid, and cuttlefish. No stabbing or goring required. Is it used to poke around on that dark ocean floor? Possible, but improbable. Narwhals, like their dolphin cousins, use sonar to guide them through the depths. The tusk is jam-packed with nerve endings. Some scientists argue it acts as some kind of sensor. That would be one insightful incisor. But it's the males who predominantly sport the tusks. If the tusks had a survival advantage, the females would also be long in the tooth. Some scientists believe this means the tusk serves the same function as a deer's antlers or a teenager's hot rod, a way to show who's the fittest male around. Males occasionally cross swords. That's tickling the ivories. But whether it's a joust or a jaw session is anybody's guess. And the narwhals aren't telling.
So, right, some additional info and some of those images and everything else that go along with kind of what we were just talking about, which is pretty exciting and neat. Ah, now we'll start again. So let's talk about the science behind narwhals a little bit, right? And we've kind of like dived into this a bit, and we're like honestly like pushing through this. I didn't know how long I was expecting this to be, but you know, I was hoping to be about an hour to two, because for those that don't know, we're actually going to be participating in Games Done Quick's hotfix Hidden Heroes later today, so kind of like got to prep for that a bit and get ready. So science, it is the only member of the genus Monodon and one of two living representatives of the family Mondontidae. You got to bear with me. I'm going to try my best to land. So the other is the beluga whale. So they are most closely related to the beluga whale. There's at least 4 extinct species. I couldn't find the 4th by name, but those are the last. And then I'll show you pictures of those guys in the next, because I think it's kind of neat. But it also does speak volumes on the fact that, right, this is a single living member of its family. It had, or of its specific genus, and that it's one of 2 living of its family, and that we know that other creatures of it existed and died and went extinct. And so it's important for us to realize that they've survived somehow, but their like family hasn't, and we need to kind of like take consideration into what that means in conservation, right? So I've been using the word cetacean a lot during this, and this is a newer term that I've learned. And what that basically means is blowhold animals. So that's talking about vaquitas, dolphins, whales, and porpoises. So we'll use that a lot. As discussed, right, diving depths have been recorded up to 7,780 feet or 2,370 meters, which is actually one of the deepest diving cetaceans. Because, right, why do you cetacean, blowhole animal, dolphins, whales, porpoises? They're mammals. They breathe air. And then like the other thing to know with that, mammals comes from the term mammary gland, which is what produces milk, right? And we're going to talk about that here in a second. And so it's like, right, they have mammary glands, they produce milk, they're mammals just like us, which is pretty cool. And then of course, because they're mammals, we take an extra like appreciation, interest in them. So the animals typically travel in groups of 3 to 8 with aggregations of up to 1,000 occurring in the summer months. So the big thing that we kind of talked about early on, and that was talked about in the Blue Planet, One Planet video, was that they migrate, right? So we usually see them in certain places during one part of the year, and then they usually migrate to the same place, which is really cool. So they're kind of like easy to track, and they always go back to those same places. And so they'll like hang out in their group of like 3 to 8 most of the year, and then during the summer months from like July, August, September, they all come together. And one of the things that we're going to talk about too is that usually births appear to be most frequent around July and August. So it's kind of cool where it's like we have these creatures that are coming together in thousands and are starting to raise babies together and be like, hey, this baby's born and now there's tons of us here, which is super awesome. So that's really cool. So most female narwhals produce by the time they're 6 to 8 years old. So that's when they hit like sexual maturity. Courtship and mating behavior for the species has been recorded from March to May. So that's when they're doing their like dances, slapping each other with the teeth. And then right, March to May is when they reside among offshore pack ice, and it's thought to involve a dominant male mating with multiple partners. So similar to some lions and other things like that. The average gestation period lasts 15 months, so remember they are very large creatures, and the thing to think about with gestation period is generally thinking about how quickly you need a animal to be functional. So the reason why elephants and giraffes have longer gestation periods is because like that baby needs to pop out and be ready to run. Right, it's partially about size, but it's also about how much because you gotta think about, right, it's really like, do you allow the baby or the like offspring and like with evolution to mature more inside or more outside? And that's why like lions are born very young and blind, because the baby can spend time to learn and grow and everything else, then you can like learn other things. So they spend 15 months, largely because of size, but also to think about like they got to be able to swim and go through the ice and everything else. So births appear most frequent between July and August, like I said, and then female narwhals have a birth interval of 2 to 3 years, and we're going to kind of go into this as well. So what's interesting with them, right, is so like 6 to 8, and then they're pregnant for 15 months, and then they usually take like 9 months off, and then they're pregnant again, and like everything like that. So then they're kind of like going through that period where it's like they're really like they're pretty active basically. And then calves are dependent on milk. So the thing to note that we're going to talk about is that you have adult narwhals. Calves is what their like babies are known as, and then they travel in pods because right, they're cetacean. So a pod of dolphins, a pod of whales, hence the narwhal pod. And so this extended lactation, so they're on milk for about 20 months, right? So almost 2 years. And this extends lactation period allows calves to develop the skills they need to survive as they mature. And then narwhals are among this. I found so fascinating. I learned this today. Narwhals are among the few animals that undergo menopause and live for decades after they finish breeding. So I just thought that was so fascinating. So it's like this huge thing, and there's actually like belief that like menopause allows you to live longer because you're not going through like, because birth is very, very demanding on the body, right? And so with that, we're having like this thing. I forgot to add something that I wanted to look up, and so it's like pretty crazy. And then the other thing to note, so with narwhals, is that like the average lifespan we think is around 50 years, and you gotta like consider that that's including like any issues with like birth, any issues with predators, anything else. But individuals have been estimated to live as old as 125, and we have had the oldest recorded being a 115-year-old female. 115 years old. So it's pretty crazy. If you guys haven't heard about the Greenland shark, we'll probably do a deep dive on them. They freak me out, man. Greenland sharks like freak me. They have been alive for like the entirety. Like one Greenland shark has like seen the rise and fall of empires, and it's fascinating. And so it's kind of common with these like bigger Arctic animals. They're able to, and so like you have 115. So it's believed that like with that menopause, when they hit it, that helps extend them. And the interesting thing with that is that females are on average actually living longer than males. So the average male, like if we take everything else out of it, but we're seeing a lot of males survive to about 84 when it's like natural death, and females it's about 100 to 110 for them. So they're outliving males by like 30 years, which is absolutely crazy and super cool. All right. Next. So yeah, these are the 3 extinct guys. I just thought that they were kind of cool to show off. So this is like obviously not actual pictures, but this is kind of like what we believe them to look like. So very similar based off of what they have. But we can see, so like one of the big things is, so both the belugas and narwhals don't have that dorsal fin. What they do have, they have like a little bit of a ridge here, and so they believe that at one point they might have had this dorsal fin here, but we can see like this guy no dorsal fin, but very, very, very large. And this guy's got like the different flippers up here, and that's probably an early still like that hand portion, while the narwhal has very small flippers up front, no dorsal fin, and then beluga has like that close. So pretty cool. If you haven't been out to Mystic in Connecticut, I want to say, in the US, they have a whole beluga whale thing. That's pretty cool and pretty neat. And then narwhals and gaming. So the big ones, Dave the Diver. So I have like mixed feelings on Dave the Diver. We're gonna just talk about gaming for a little bit. So Dave the Diver, the game was neat, but like as like an ocean conservationist, it was kind of sad because it's like you have to like go kill narwhals. It like made me really upset. And then I also feel like they really take like they really take a gag with like the conservationists in it. And I kind of like left Dave the Diver where I was like, well, this is a really pretty game, and it's not an indie game. That's the other thing. It won like indie game of the year because of its style, and the corporation that like made it was like, we're not an indie studio, and this kind of makes us feel uncomfortable. But because it was like fan submitted and everything, people just assumed it was an indie game based off like its style. But yeah, so it's like, it's an interesting game, and like you can learn a lot. It's got like some weird stuff going on into it, not to spoil it. But yeah, you do like learn a lot, and you can like see a lot of like cool marine life, but you are catching them to make them into sushi, so like that doesn't feel great, especially when there's like endangered and all kinds of stuff. And it's like upsetting because they make this big deal about how dolphins are friends because they're mammals, but then they have you killing narwhals, and narwhals are mammals too. So I'm like, what are we doing, man? This isn't like neat. So that was kind of upsetting. Overcooked, that's our guy over here. That's a little rainbow narwhal. That's who I usually play as when we play Overcooked. So that's a fun one. Overcooked, for those who haven't seen, like you're running a restaurant with your friends, and you gotta like serve all your food and stuff, and it's stressful because some of you can only cut up the vegetables, and you gotta give the vegetables to your buddy on the other side of the kitchen, who then can like actually cook it and then has to give it back to you to plate, and then you gotta like deliver it. But it's pretty neat. Starwall came out 2 years ago, last year maybe. It's a battle royale crazy like lighting thing with narwhals, which is pretty neat. And then Dredge, we actually 100% over at my channel, The Pied Piper, earlier this year, and that was like a really enjoyable time. And so the Pale Reach is a like Arctic expedition in DLC of that, and something we probably might play here. But of course it is another fishing game, and Dredge, you like trawl and all kinds of other stuff, and trawling's like one of the biggest issues with overfishing and damaged ecosystems and pollution into the ocean. So it's like, it kind of feels weird to be like playing these games that almost feel like they're glamorizing some of the things that are the most dangerous to our environment, but it is a good opportunity to kind of like see and meet and these other things. Kimono Friends is a mobile app and game. It's like anime people. I know very little about it, but I have seen and like doing lookups on narwhals and stuff. They are in there. There's like a little anime narwhal girl. She's cute. Called Narwhal. And then this I thought was fascinating because I feel like narwhals, so like the reason why we, as many might know, and we'll like be mentioning later on, that we got really into narwhals was due to the song that went viral of narwhals swimming in the ocean, causing a commotion because they are so awesome. And I feel like that song, for whatever reason, it was just like that moment in the internet was just, it like went throughout and rippled across everything, and so it like entered the ether of today. And so I feel like we've really seen like an increase of like interest in narwhals and talks of them. And then of course the Reddit, if you guys don't know, you can always find a Redditor out in public, and we've kind of like moved away from this, but it is like the running gag, I forget kind of how it started, but it was like, we need what's known as like a dog whistle for Redditors out in public. And so a dog whistle, for those who are unaware, is like you get a tattoo. That's usually like when we talk about dog whistle, or you wear shirts or something. And what it is like, it looks very innocent to bystanders, or it means nothing to general people, but those that know, you know. And so narwhal bacons at midnight is the phrase that Redditors use to talk about narwhals. So the narwhal has seen since the 2000s multiple times on Jeopardy as well. So there's been like questions about narwhals, and specifically narwhals baconing at midnight on Jeopardy. So we've seen like this huge increase. So what I thought was really interesting was that this Macintosh and Microsoft game made by LucasArts came out in 1996 called Mortimer and the Riddles of the Medallion, where you play as a snail and you're kind of like going through these challenges and everything else. And they had a narwhal character, and they have like a beluga whale and like a blue whale and a sperm whale and all kinds of stuff. And like, just I know we're talking about narwhals, but I really do want to put out like one of the things that absolutely blows my mind consistently, and I still like have a hard time wrapping my head around it, is that the blue whale is the largest living creature that we know to ever have existed on Earth. Like, do you know how wild it is that we are actively living at the exact same time as the largest thing that's ever existed on Earth? It is larger than every single dinosaur. That is like, imagine your brain what you think the size of a T-Rex is, and now imagine that underwater, and that is still too small of what the size of a blue whale is. It is, imagine a building put underwater, maybe you're close. Like, it's wild. But yeah, so I think it's really cool that like Narwhals have had some sort of representation gaming as early as the 90s. So I think that's pretty neat, and maybe something we'll try and play over here just for fun. Try and find a copy of that game and be able to play it and show it off here, because we do want to talk about raising money and doing conservation, just like being able to play some fun games and bring some awareness and drop as much info as we can for all you beautiful people out there. So, like I said, let's talk about conservation. So, things to note. So, conservation stats for narwhals is that they're of least concern. They're not in like endangered idea, but one of those things to note that we talked about earlier is that 4 members of their family have already gone extinct. So it's important to recognize that the narwhal is the single creature of its genus. There's nothing else like it that exists. So, and then of course the biggest threat with it that I do want to like hit is climate change. And so it's like, it's not really, because of that, it's not fishing, right? It's not like, oh, we're slowly losing and narwhals are being targeted and everything else, because we've done really great things, and I'm about to cover that have helped protect them in general, and that's why they are considered least concerned, because we did preventative action early, right? And that is the biggest thing. But the problem is like climate change is coming at us so quickly, and it's like eventually if their habitat is ruined, it's not like it's going to be extremely hard to reverse or save them. And so when we talk about like, hey, what are the things that we can do to help protect them, it's really talking about protecting their habitat and protecting the Arctic, because there is so much stuff in the Arctic that is worth protecting and needing to protect. And so their current population is between 80,000 and 100,000. There have been numbers up to 120,000 or 130,000 been noted. So there's a lot of narwhals, right? Which is really cool. They're in like a bunch of different pod areas, basically. So we like know that there's like so many in Greenland and so many in this portion of Canada and this portion in Canada. And so we do a pretty good job at monitoring and tracking them through satellite and other things. But some things to note: they are classified as a special concern under the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, or COSWIC, which aims to classify the risk levels of species in the country. So even though on the like international front we're calling them least concern, they are listed as special concerns, so something to note. And then as in the 70s, the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the United States banned imports of products made from narwhal parts. So the U.S. stopped having any imports or any fishing or anything like that, which, right, because ivory was the big thing. And so, and then they were listed on Appendix 2 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, and the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. And so those committees restrict international trading of live animals and their body parts, as well as implement sustainable action plans. So they are listed officially, so they are being tracked, they are being monitored. And once again, this goes back to like, we've been doing this for a while to help do it, but what's absolutely wild and like it's exciting for this year is that only in this year, like this year that we're talking about right now, to date at 2025, I know it's the end of the year, but it's still 2025 for now, is that the UK only started protecting narwhals under the Ivory Act, which then forbid the trade in teeth and tusks except for artistic and cultural artifacts, which is still a little concerning, because it's like, what else, like medicine, like it's kind of crazy. So it's like they're not even fully protected still, so they can still be hunted for their ivory and their teeth, and that's pretty crazy. And then the other thing I do want to bring up, and like you can really tell in this image that was crazy that we saw it in the Nat Geo and World's Wildest, 10 feet these teeth can be, which is just crazy, right? So we're talking that this thing is already, 18 feet long and with a 10-foot tusk. It's crazy. So pretty cool. So charities that we're going to highlight today that like preserve the Arctic habit and protect narwhals. Number one is the Whale and Dolphin Conservation. They're the leading global charity to dedicate to the protection and conservation of whales and dolphins. So all safe stations is kind of what they consider. So they do end up focusing more on some of those more endangered. So that's talking about like the vaquita and things like that as well. Which shout outs to like Casey Snow Art, who just did Save the Vaquita Week, and shout outs to porpoise.org that did Save the Vaquita Day. But just to kind of like talk about those things and like move into that. And then you have the WWF, which huge fans and we supporting them, and we're doing Jingle Jam with them. And so make sure that you guys tune in next Wednesday when we talk about Jingle Jam stuff and talk with Tiltify and Calm partners. And if you guys are interested in talking at all with WWF directly, you can join their wildlife streamers, or you can join our Discord at discord.narwhalpod.org, and you can talk to like Luke, who is the WWF UK charity fundraiser manager. So they're active and more than willing to talk and help. And we're actually releasing an article regarding Jingle Jam here soon. And we've already released an article on WWF. And we're going to be releasing articles on all three of these here in the near future. We always save the last week of the month for charity highlights. So every week we do usually 1 to 2 articles is kind of our goal. And then at the end of the month, we always save our last article of the month for a charity and nonprofit highlight. And so WWF is an international non-government or NGO founded in 1961 that works in the field of wilderness preservation, the reduction of human impact on the environment. You may have previously known it as just the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, which remains its official name in Canada and the United States. WWF is the largest conservation organization with over 5 million supporters worldwide, working in more than 100 countries and supporting around 3,000 conservation and environmental projects. And then there's just like a bunch of facts and info on screen about them. They're really incredible. And one of the cool things that they do as well is that you can do symbolic adoptions, which is something that we've done here at the Narwhal Pod. We have symbolically adopted a type of squid, a otter, and a narwhal, and so the money where you get some cool stuff out of that. So we got like a certificate and we got a plush and stuff, and then we did all that. And then I've also done a few extra ones where I've done symbolic adoptions for friends and family as gifts, which is really cool. So you can go check out WWF, and there's more information in our Discord about that. And then I'm gonna move myself over here. So then Alaska Conservation Foundation, here we can go here actually. So they were founded in 1980, and they are the only public foundation solely dedicated to conservation in Alaska. So with the Narwhal Pod being near Alaska, or the Narwhal Pods being near Alaska and Canada, it's definitely important to look at. And then also we're talking about preserving that Arctic habitat in general. So basically the idea is like if we save Alaska, we save the entire Arctic, because you can't just like save Alaska by itself, right? And then also like through the Inuit people and everything else like that. So they connect thousands of committed donors and businesses worldwide with more than 100 grassroots conservation organizations in Alaska. And through strategic funding, Alaska Conservation Foundation supports Alaska's most critical issues, fosters problem solving and innovation, and protects Alaska's incredible yet vulnerable ecosystems, communities, and economies. So that's really going into, right, those ecosystems and conserving those, because the other thing that we got to think about is not only protecting narwhals, but because they are so large, they eat a lot, so we need to protect their food sources as well, and make sure that Alaska is a safe place for them to swim and for the fish that they consume to swim and survive off as well. And the last one we're going to talk about is Polar Bears International. They're the only conservation organization with the sole mission to conserve polar bears and the sea ice they depend on. So once again, we're talking, if you guys didn't know, Arctic means with bears. I think it's Norse or something like that. And then Antarctic means no bears. So we literally named the North Pole the one with bears and the South Pole the one without bears. So if you're ever trying to remember, that's how it goes. So when we're talking about the North Pole and Greenland in that area, and I'm sure you guys have seen the videos where the polar bears have gotten broken on ice and actually drifted all the way to Greenland, which is way south for them. And Greenland gets way too hot in the summer for them to survive. And then also, like, they really don't know what to do in Greenland, and there are some people in Greenland, and it's problematic, to say the least. And so Polar Bear International, going back to preserving that Arctic landscape, they're able to like provide and help and do that. And so they use media, science, advocacy, and education to inspire people to care about the Arctic, which is what we're trying to do, the threats to its future and the connection between this remote region and our global climate. Together, they work to ensure long-term survival of polar bears and changing climate and halting carbon emission to stabilize our own climate and our future. So going back once again, what was the biggest threat to narwhals, chat? That's right, it was climate change. So having them fight climate change and reduce carbon emissions is how we're able to do that. And so I just want to say thank you all. This was about this was a little shorter than an hour, but not too bad. But I hope you guys learned some cool and fun things. We'll be doing like hour-long streams to 2-hour-long streams here, and then adding games. So we might do these. Maybe we'll start doing this and then doing gaming. That way we do like 3 hours or something. So thank you guys so much for attending our first deep dive and our first stream. You can always reach out to us at narwhalpodteam@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us using our website. We do have a contact us option there, where we'll send messages to our email and we're able to respond there. We're gonna do streams every Thursday. There will be a few moments here and there, so the best way to stay up to date with us is join the Discord by going to discord.narwhalpod.org. You can also see our stream schedule and more info over on the events tab in the Narwhal Pod. So if you go to narwhalpod.org/events, you'll be able to see everything that's going on there. We also raise awareness through the international weeks and the international days for certain animals, and you can always follow us on Blue Sky as well at narwhalpod.org over there on Blue Sky. Our streams will be, for the current time being, will be at 1900 Central European Time and at 1300 Eastern Standard Time. So for those of you that are watching over, though, that's all I have. Thank you again so much for being here. It has been a delight. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you again next week. For those of you on Twitch, don't go anywhere. We're going to raid over to a beautiful human being, and we're going to be able to have some fun over there. So let's kick over to this guy and let's do our raid message, y'all, which is, for those, it's the Saba ping, and it's Narwhal. The Narwhal pod is swimming in, so we're gonna swim in somewhere. Let's find a beautiful human being to raid over to by we're gonna check out Twitch. Hello? We're just gonna make one live. We're making it live, y'all. There we go. Boop. Nice. Alright, let's find a beautiful human being to raid over to. We're going to see who currently is live, so we can see Animal Sanctuary, Marine Dash, Turtles and Chill, California Burbs, Reef and Aquarium, and then we have a few other people always worth checking out. But let's see who else is live under Science and Technology. And let's just see if there's, let's do animals. Do we want to do animals or science? I was curious. We'll check out Science and Technology real quick, and we're going to change this to English and see if we got anybody doing something regarding animals or something like that. It looks like it's a lot of chemistry and earthquake stuff live right now. Maybe we need to change ours to be animals next time. That might hold up a little bit better. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody, so I think we're going to raid over to one of those channels that we're following. So thank you so much for being here. Let's raid over to Marine Mammal Rescue. If you guys haven't checked them out, they are managed by porpoise.org, and they are located, I believe, in British Columbia, and they do a lot of rehabilitation efforts, and they lead like a bunch of the leading rehabilitation efforts for the people over or all the animals everywhere. So let's raid over to them, and we get to watch some cute little otters have fun. And like I said, for those of you on YouTube, thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, bye. Stay hydrated, have a good one, and thank you so much. We'll be raiding in 3, 2, 1, blast off.